Sigma Bank, monitoring your total balance and recent activity has never been easier. Transfers are instant and confirmed.
Okay, what if I told you that you could own a tiny piece of the Empire State Building? Or maybe a sliver of the Mona Lisa? Sounds like something out of a sci-fi movie, right? Well, it's not. There's a huge tech revolution happening right now that's making this possible. Today, we're going to dive into something called tokenization and how it's about to completely unlock the value of some of the world's most exclusive assets.
All right, so here's our game plan for today. First, we'll dig into the big problem with real assets, the way things are right now. Then, we'll talk about the super cool digital solution, tokenization, and the blockchain tech that makes it all safe and secure. We'll even look at a real-world company doing this before zooming out to see what this all means for the future of, well, owning stuff.
Okay, let's jump right in. We're starting with the source of all the friction here. And we're talking about a huge market, one of the oldest and biggest in the world, real estate. But here's the crazy thing. For all its massive value, it's an industry that's been, let's just say, notoriously slow to change.
So think about this for a second. Owning a piece of a skyscraper. What if that was as easy as buying a stock on an app? I mean, for most of us, owning a chunk of prime real estate feels like a total pipe dream, right? Completely out of reach. But what if it didn't have to be that way?
And just to be clear, we are not talking about some small niche market here. This is massive. According to research from Savills, by 2026, the global real estate investment turnover is expected to hit over $1 trillion. $1 trillion! That's just an insane amount of global wealth, and a lot of it is just stuck. It's not easy to move around.
And that's the big paradox, isn't it? For such a huge market, the whole process feels like it's stuck in the dark ages. It's just bogged down by literal mountains of paperwork, a whole army of middlemen, and timelines that just drag on forever. All that friction, it creates these huge barriers that basically lock most people out of the game.
So, okay, if the old system is so slow and clunky, what's the alternative? Well, the solution comes down to this really powerful idea that could unlock that whole $1 trillion market. And that idea is tokenization.
All right, first things first. Let's make sure we're on the same page with the lingo. Real-world assets, or RWAs. It's exactly what it sounds like. We're talking about valuable stuff you can actually touch in the real world. Buildings, art, gold, you get the picture.
Okay, now here's where things get really interesting. Tokenization. Think of it like this. You're taking a real physical thing and you're creating digital shares for it. According to Cointelegraph, it's the process of turning the ownership rights of that physical asset into a secure digital token that lives on a blockchain. This is the real game changer.
So, how does this actually work? Well, it's pretty straightforward, really. First, you take the asset, say an office building, and get all the legal stuff sorted out. Then, you create what's called a smart contract, which is basically just a digital contract with all the ownership rules baked right in. After that, you create the digital tokens that represent ownership, and finally, those tokens are issued and can be bought and sold on a marketplace, often 24/7, just like you'd trade stock.
Okay, but here's the million-dollar question. Literally, how on earth can you trust some digital token to represent a multi-million-dollar building? It sounds a little flimsy, right? Well, the answer lies in the technology that powers the whole thing, the blockchain. You see, blockchain isn't just some fancy database. As explained in the book AI Frameworks Enabled by Blockchain, it's more like a fundamental trust layer for the internet. It's the foundation that makes everything verifiable and secure.
So what makes it so trustworthy? Well, a few key things. First, it's decentralized. That means no single company or government is in charge, so there's no single point of failure. Second, it's transparent. Every transaction is recorded on a shared public ledger that anyone can check. And maybe most important, it's immutable. Once a record is added, it's there forever. It cannot be changed or deleted. All these things work together to create a system of trust that doesn't need a middleman.
Okay, so this all sounds great in theory, but what does it actually look like in the real world? Let's check out a case study to see how this tokenization thing works in practice. So let's talk about Sigma. It's a platform that's built to do exactly this, to be the bridge between physical assets and the digital world. Their whole goal is to make the entire process way smoother for both buyers and sellers. And when you compare the old way to the Sigma way, the difference is like night and day. We're talking about replacing piles of paperwork with digital uploads. Instead of waiting forever for approvals, you get fast financial verification. It's about turning a slow, manual process into one with instant, secure transactions. It's a total overhaul.
So let's say you're a buyer. The whole journey starts with just discovering properties.
But instead of jumping between a million different websites and brokers, you can just browse through a bunch of premium, verified properties, all right there in the app.
And you know that part that's usually a huge headache? Applying for a loan? Yeah, that's all digitized too. You can just upload your documents right into the app for review, which makes the whole thing way faster and a lot more transparent.
And then you get to the finish line, confirmation. The platform handles all the complicated stuff in the background, the verifications, the appraisals, all of it. And what you're left with is fast, tamper-proof digital ownership, all secured on the blockchain.
Yeah, their motto really nails it, where trust meets technology. The whole point is using tech to make buying and selling real stuff faster, safer, and just better.
All right, so let's zoom back out for a second. We've looked at the problem, the digital solution, and even a real company making it happen. So what does this all mean for the bigger picture, for the future of ownership itself?
Well, the potential benefits are just massive. First, you get way more liquidity, meaning you can trade assets like buildings 24/7, just like crypto. Then there's fractional ownership, so you really can own just a small piece of something huge. This opens the door for way more people to invest. Plus, everything is more transparent because it's on the blockchain, and it can slash costs by cutting out a lot of the middlemen and paperwork.
But let's be real, it's not all perfect just yet. As publications like Cointelegraph have pointed out, there are still some big challenges. For one, the laws and regulations are still trying to catch up to the technology. And you still have the very real problem of keeping the actual physical assets safe. Plus, for any of this to work, you need enough buyers and sellers to make the market actually move. These are tough nuts to crack.
But here's the crucial takeaway. We're looking at a technology that could fundamentally change our entire relationship with physical things. It has the potential to turn these big, static assets into liquid, digital investments that pretty much anyone can access.
And that brings us to a final, really interesting thought. I mean, if you can tokenize a building, you can tokenize pretty much anything valuable. A rare piece of art, a classic car, you name it. So it leaves us with this one big question. As this tech gets better and better, what's next? What will we own tomorrow?
Sigma Bank, monitoring your total balance and recent activity has never been easier. Transfers are instant and confirmed.
You know, what if you could buy a piece of a skyscraper just as easily as you buy a stock? Well, that's pretty much the promise of tokenization. Today, we're digging into how blockchain technology is set to totally reshape the world of real estate, turning actual bricks and mortar into digital assets you can trade in, a flash. All right, so here's the plan. We're going to start by unpacking why the current real estate model is, kind of broken. Then we'll check out a fintech solution that's trying to fix it. After that, we'll get into the nitty-gritty of how tokenization actually works and what it could mean for the future of the property market. And to wrap it all up, we'll get a little philosophical and ask, is this about to change what it even means to own something?
Okay, let's kick things off with a problem that's probably painfully familiar to a lot of you. The whole process of buying and selling property just feels like it's stuck in the dark ages.
I mean, seriously, in a world where you can do almost anything instantly, why is buying or selling a house still so incredibly slow, expensive, and just complicated, right? You're just bogged down by mountains of paperwork, you've got this long chain of middlemen, and there's a huge lack of what financial folks call liquidity, which is really just a fancy way of saying you can't sell it quickly. It can take months to get the cash out of your house, and the fees are just staggering. This is the exact problem that tokenization is trying to solve. So, if that's the problem, who's actually trying to fix it? Well, let's take a look at one fintech company that thinks they have the answer. Okay, so this is Sigma Bank, and their whole mission is pretty ambitious. They want to completely redefine how we all buy and sell real assets. And their secret weapon? You guessed it, it's using blockchain to make everything way faster and a whole lot more secure. So for you, the buyer, the process is meant to be super simple. You just use one single app to find a property, check that it's all legit, and then finish the whole transaction securely. What you get at the end is fast, digital, tamper-proof ownership. And the best part, it's all handled in one spot. And it's not just for buyers. For sellers, the promise is just as big a deal. The platform helps you get your property valued, connects you with serious buyers who've already been verified, and this is huge. Make sure you get paid instantly and securely. It's all about getting rid of all that friction and all those delays that make selling a house such a headache. Okay, so you're probably thinking, what's the magic here? What's the actual tech that makes all this speed and security even possible? Well, the answer is a really cool concept called tokenization. So at its core, a tokenized real-world asset, or an RWA as you'll hear it called, is basically a digital twin of something in the real world. Just imagine a digital deed to your house that lives securely on the blockchain. It sounds simple, but that one idea means a whole building can be bought, sold, and traded just as easily as a share of stock. It's a game changer. So how does this actually happen? Well, it pretty much breaks down into 4 main steps. First up, the actual property is legally identified and professionally valued. Then, a smart contract gets created on the blockchain. Now, think of this like a digital agreement that automatically enforces all the rules of ownership, so you don't need a lawyer or a banker in the middle. After that, digital tokens are created, and each one represents a tiny slice of the property. And finally, those tokens can be bought and sold on a digital marketplace. Simple as that. And when you put it side by side, you can really see what a huge transformation this is. You know, traditional real estate is super illiquid. It's slow and it's a pain to sell. Tokenization, on the other hand, makes it liquid. You can trade it 24/7. The old way has these massive barriers to entry, right? You need a ton of capital, but tokenization allows for fractional ownership, which means you can buy just a small piece of a huge building. It totally democratizes access. And finally, traditional deals can be really opaque with this complicated paper trail, but a blockchain ledger, it's transparent and nobody can change it. All right, so let's zoom out a bit, because this isn't just about 1 or 2 cool startups. This is part of a much bigger, fundamental shift that's starting to reshape the entire global real estate market. And don't just take my word for it. Research from the big global real estate firm Savills says that technology isn't some niche thing anymore. It's now the second most important force shaping the entire market. And this wave of what they call prop tech, or property technology, includes everything from AI managing buildings to the very blockchain tech we're talking about right now. And this whole tech shift is happening at a really interesting time. The broader market is starting to feel a lot more optimistic. You know, interest rates seem to be stabilizing, investment is bouncing back, and projections show global turnover is going to climb back over $1 trillion by 2026. That really creates the perfect storm, a perfect environment for these new tech-driven ways of investing to really grab hold. And this chart, wow, this really puts it all into perspective. I mean, the overall economic outlook is, of course, still number 1. But look what's right behind it: technology and AI. It's now ahead of things that have driven the market for decades, like demographics. What that tells you is that the big players, the investors, the industry leaders, they truly believe that tech is going to be one of the main engines of change and, frankly, of opportunity for the next few years. But look, we have to be real here. We have to balance all of this incredible promise with a very clear-eyed look at the challenges. I mean, this is a revolutionary idea. And let's be honest, revolutions are never simple. So what are the biggest hurdles? Well, first off, regulation is a total minefield. The laws are different everywhere, and they're still being written. Then there's something called custody, which is the huge challenge of legally and securely tying a digital token to an actual physical building. You also have to get the market to actually accept and adopt this stuff on a wide scale. And how do you even accurately value these little fractional pieces? And let's not forget, the technology itself isn't perfect. Smart contracts can have bugs, and that's a big risk. And all of this brings us to one final big thought. As this technology gets better and these challenges start to get solved, are we heading towards a world where the very idea of ownership is, well, just fundamentally different? A future where maybe you could own a tiny piece of the Eiffel Tower, or a fraction of an apartment in Tokyo, or a share in a massive skyscraper in New York, all from an app on your phone. The technology to do it is here. But whether we actually choose to build that future, well, that's the real question, isn't it?
Sigma Bank, monitoring your total balance and recent activity has never been easier. Transfers are instant and confirmed.
All right, let's get right into it. You know, we hear all the time about the wild, speculative side of crypto. But what if the biggest revolution isn't loud at all? What if it's happening quietly, inside the very financial institutions we think of as old school? Today, we're going to pull back the curtain on how Wall Street is taking crypto's biggest idea and using it to rebuild finance from the inside out. So our story kicks off with a fintech startup called Sigma, and they have a mission that's about as bold as it gets. They want to use blockchain to completely change how we buy and sell real estate. Yeah, one of the most real-world assets you can possibly think of. And their tagline pretty much says it all. Real assets, real people, real fast. The whole point is to take this incredibly slow, paper-filled, and honestly super frustrating process of property deals and make it totally seamless. They're using brand new tech to solve a very old, very human problem. So let's dig into what's actually behind this. I mean, what does creating a new financial estate really look like? Well, think of it this way. Sigma is building a world where owning property isn't about a dusty deed in a filing cabinet. Instead, it's a secure, digital, and instantly verifiable token on a blockchain. For you as a buyer, that means you know the property is legit and the transaction is safe. And for sellers, it means you get your money instantly and you're only dealing with serious, verified buyers. And listen, this isn't just some pie-in-the-sky idea from a couple of kids in a garage. The founder, Victor Ange, has over 30 years of management experience. He's a project management professional and a certified blockchain expert. So the company's vision is grounded in some serious real-world know-how and deep technical expertise. But as cool as Sigma is, the story is way, way bigger than just one company. So let's zoom out for a second and see how this one startup fits into this massive, industry-wide shift, something I like to call Wall Street's quiet remodel. You see, for years, fintech was all about putting a prettier app on top of the same old, slow banking system. But this is different. This is about ripping out and rebuilding the core plumbing, the actual pipes and rails that money and assets move on. And the key piece of technology making all this happen is called tokenization. It's actually a pretty simple idea, but it's incredibly powerful. You just take a traditional asset, like a piece of a building, a government bond, or even just $1 in a bank, and you create a secure digital version of it, a token that can live on a blockchain. And the biggest players in finance? They're absolutely building on this concept. They're exploring this thing called the Regulated Liability Network, or RLN. Just imagine a private, ultra-secure superhighway built just for banks, where they can settle huge transactions instantly using this new tokenized money. That's the future they're prototyping right now. And get this is not some fringe experiment. The New York Fed itself kicked off a proof of concept for this RLN, and just look at the list of who's involved. BNY Mellon, Citi, HSBC, MasterCard, Wells Fargo. I mean, these are the absolute pillars of the global financial system, and they are all seriously looking at how to build this new plumbing. So on one hand, you've got these financial giants trying to build this from the top down, and on the other, you have agile startups like Sigma trying to build it from the ground up. So how does an idea like this actually get off the ground? Well, it turns out there's a pretty well-established playbook for innovators. It's the million-dollar question, right? You've got this amazing vision for the future, but where on earth do you start? Well, you don't start by trying to build the entire thing all at once. No, you start small. You start with what's called a minimum viable product, or MVP. The lean startup pioneer, Eric Ries, defined it perfectly. It's basically the simplest, most bare-bones version of your product that you can get into the hands of real customers just to see if your core idea actually has legs. It's all about learning as fast as possible without wasting time and money. And the process itself is a simple loop. First, you find a real problem people have. Then you figure out a better way to solve it than anyone else. After that, you build that super basic version to test your solution. And then, and this is the key, you launch it, you measure what happens, and you learn what to do next. It's a cycle. And believe me, this method, it works. Take a look at this number. Over 8,100. That's how many companies have graduated from just one startup accelerator, the Founder Institute. It is a proven model for turning big ideas into actual fundable businesses. And that's exactly why these accelerators are so important. They give founders like Victor Ange the structure, the expert advice, and the network they need to go through that whole process and build something real that can attract investment and actually grow. Okay, so we've got individual innovators with big ideas, we've got a playbook to help them build, and we've got this huge industry shift happening at the very top. So for our last section, let's connect all those dots and look at what it really means to build an on-chain future, a world where our most important assets live right on a blockchain. Remember Sigma's mission to tokenize real estate? Well, check this out. According to the global property advisory firm Savills, technology is now the #2 biggest force shaping the entire global real estate industry. This isn't some tiny niche trend anymore. It's a primary driver of a market worth trillions of dollars. And that brings us to this incredibly powerful quote from Hong Feng, the president of OKX. The convergence between crypto and traditional finance is no longer theoretical. It is happening right now. The wall between these two worlds is coming down, folks. This isn't a prediction. It's happening as we speak. So what does this on-chain future really feel like for us? Well, it means going from a system where a simple transaction can take days to one where it happens instantly. It means replacing institutional gatekeepers with data that anyone can verify is true. We are talking about a fundamental shift from slow, paper-based systems that only work 9 to 5 to a digital world that is always on, 24/7. And that leaves us with one final, pretty mind-bending question to chew on. This isn't just a small upgrade. It's a total reimagining of ownership itself. So what really happens when our most valuable assets, our homes, our retirement funds, our money, are all just data that can move as securely and instantly as sending an email? That's the on-chain future they're building.
With Sigma Bank, monitoring your total balance and recent activity has never been easier. Transfers are instant and confirmed.